everybody. Welcome back. Another week. You crazy politics nerds out there, you nutbags who come on here to listen to us. You
Yes.
mutants. Welcome back. And
Hi,
hello,
everybody.
Joanna.
Hi, Brent. I'm so glad to be back. It's been a couple of weeks now since we were all hanging out, and we will not be having our dear friend Sean Rouse here on the podcast this week. You are getting the originals.
The OGs.
Yeah, the OGs. And we're here in Menaquest, the unceded territory of the Pescataway, Wolastoqey, and Mi'kmaq peoples. And it's Indigenous Peoples Day this Friday, actually tomorrow. So very much happy to recognize those who stewarded this land long before us settlers all arrived here.
That's right. We have a very mixed bag this week. Things to talk about. Bunch of stuff to get caught up on. Like we just couldn't put it together. I was working on a job and just couldn't squeak in the time to get on here and record and get it out. So we ran an old episode with Doug Griffiths last week. If you didn't listen to that, it was a rerun from last year. It was a lot. It was a great chat that we had, and I think it brought up again some really important points, even in this election season, as like we're coming in with parties are now starting to ramp up their campaign. Candidates are trying to get acquainted with the issues. If you're a candidate and you're running and you're not listening to this podcast, I don't understand, first of all. But second of all, if you are listening to this podcast haphazardly, that's one to listen to, because it really helps you peek behind the curtain, if you will.
Yeah.
Some of the interactions between provinces, municipalities, and just broader thinking around politics, and Doug helps us do that quite well. And as a former Conservative cabinet minister himself, he has a perspective that's really helpful, and we enjoyed that chat with him too.
Yeah, he's a super smart guy, and if you have a chance to check out his book, absolutely. He might actually have more than one at this point.
He does, yeah. He's a couple of books, best-selling author as well.
Yeah,
13 Ways to Kill Your Community.
Always great to talk to people who are well-versed on these topics. But this week, it's all about the home province, isn't it?
Yeah. So we got polling to talk about. 2 polls, actually. One from Narrative Research and one delivered by yours truly on the state of affairs. We actually had quite a few respondents. I was pretty impressed. We had 30 people get back to us on the poll that I put up on Twitter. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the new Narrative Research numbers. We'll talk about some party fundraising numbers. We might have time to talk about candidates in the Butternut Valley region, Arcadia. We have a full slate there now for the most part. We might have, or we are going to try to get on some of the Auditor General stuff that's been coming out, some of the news around Bruce Northrop going to run, and
I got a new opponent for my
That's right.
over on the west side there. The PCs had their
TikTok star.
Yeah, TikTok star Kimmy Blondie, also known as Kim Costain, who I have met. She's a West Sider. She's very lovely person, and but she's interesting because she's a bit of the polar opposite of our much talked about guest. I was going to call her topic of Faitine Grassetti. She very much is like a sex positive person. Her TikTok before she was signing up to run was full of fun videos, like being a sassy mom, kind of thing, sassy wine mom, as they say on TikTok. With
not just sassy, spicy. They were spicy. 18. It was 18 plus. It was 18 plus. It's inconceivable that these two people find themselves at a table making governance decisions together on moral fabric and ethical issues. I would just
love to be the person in the fly on the wall for any conversation they might have about some of this stuff, because I'm a huge supporter. There's this MP from Australia that I follow who has been super open about previously having an OnlyFans account and just being who she is. This is a much sort of shrouded like thing in society that, women participate in to make money. And I don't think that that's what Kim was doing. But she certainly like gained a lot of TikTok notoriety. She has over 60,000 followers there, for being a little more sassy on the internet.
Hmm.
And I do not fault any woman for doing that, because it's the oldest kind of like profession in the world, is like, burlesque type stuff. And that's totally cool with me. And I'm glad that she felt comfortable enough to sign up for the PC party, honestly, because like that just was a surprise, because based on like the moral value conversations we've been having around the PCs, it just seemed like out of character that they would accept her. So good for them.
Yep. Yep. It's an interesting thing, right? Like, but the one I get a little bit frustrated about is the scrubbing of the internet. I mean,
Mm,
Kim, if you're listening, why not stand behind this stuff? And like, people are going to find it anyway. You're trying to sweep it under the carpet. And, people have already been sending us videos. Like, there's the Wayback Machine. You can go online and go discover different parts of the internet at different points in time in history. And, this stuff doesn't hide. You can't hide it. It's going to come out. And it just looks bad when it looks like you want to pretend it didn't happen and didn't exist. And honestly, that is a conservative tactic. It's also a liberal tactic, right? Like, liberals have a little bit more of a progressive base, if you will, and that base is a little more unwilling to excuse, immoral or unethical behavior in some ways. Conservatives really, they talk a big game about family values and think of the kids and all this stuff. But when it comes down to it, there are a lot of like, there's a lot of, oh, just don't talk about it. Like, oh, hush, hush, just like they don't crucify their candidates when they find out weird stuff like affairs happened, and not the same way, at least from what I understand, political science kind of review stuff. So, it's to me, it's like, I don't think you're setting yourself up very well here for this. And I think you are going to have to own some of it and give a juxtaposition to voters. Like, I think one of the things that's frustrating, and we can talk about this some more maybe as a topic that might end up bridging to the other poll that I did online. I think what's frustrating to me and to many voters is this refusal to get with the times.
yeah.
There's, and I'm not talking about, moral order or any of that, social values. I'm not talking about that. But that's not what I mean. Like, we are in a time when people are looking for genuine and authentic more than ever.
Yeah.
We see it with candidates like John Fetterman in Pennsylvania. We see it with candidates like even Kevin Arsenault, as from Kent North. We see it in polling review after review, and cohorts of
Yeah.
people that are voting for populists and things like that. It's like more and more people just want to know that somebody's being honest with them. And as soon as you give them a reason to see dishonesty, it just reinforces the cynicism, the skepticism, and the frustration with this system. And I have to say, and I've said it on here so many times that it's probably making everyone who's listening sick of it, but things aren't okay. Like, more than ever, politicians are under attack. Like, people don't want to run. Why is Susan Holt not able to recruit more than 5 women? Right? She's going to have the worst gender parity caucus if she gets everybody elected that is running. It's going to be the most older male dominated, like males with money especially, dominated
Yeah.
caucus. And I don't think it's necessarily Susan Holt's fault. I think it's because, we've seen some reports, and I'm just trying to remember, and if I can find it before the end of the episode, I'll talk to you about the reporter who wrote this review about
Hmm.
the multitude of people who now have to have close security, people's garages being burned down in Parliament, even members of provincial legislatures being threatened and attacked. And people are so damn frustrated, like they are
Hmm.
sharpening machetes, they are finding pitchforks, they are starting to light their torches. And I'm not being alarmist. Like all you have to do is look at the election in the UK. Like all you have to do is see your prime minister, like Justin Trudeau, have to come out on stage with bulletproof vests. Like,
Yeah,
if
they
you
like
guys,
locked down the like FCM, like they
yeah,
had to,
yeah,
shut
they had to
down
lock the
the.
doors on the entire
Yeah,
Federation of Canadian Municipalities conference just for Justin to be there. Like, you can be outraged at your politicians all you want, but the second that you're going to try to use violence, then you're just a mob, right? The second
yeah.
that you can justifiably like use violence against somebody when we have a system the way it is, it's like you found your way onto the parts of the internet that tell you to distrust everything, believe in conspiracies, hate your neighbor, and kill them. And I part ways like way before that. But I mean, this is happening, people. And like liberals, conservatives, if you guys don't care, keep doing what you're doing, because it really shows that you don't care, that you're
Yeah.
not worried about the kind of the fabric, the democratic fabric and social cohesion of our communities. When you do it like
There's
this,
there's no issue with having, being proud of your body. There's no issue with being body positive, with being sex positive, in my mind at all. Like, I was genuinely excited to see this for her, and like to see that she'd taken all of that content down and is trying to create this more wholesome image. Like, I just would rather, yeah, so what? Like, everybody in town, like, who, like, you 60,000 followers. Like, not a lot of people in the Maritimes have such a big impact on TikTok. So this was like the talk of the market. People are, like you say, sending us stuff. Like, this is a call not to shame, but to be honest and to just own it, embrace it, be who you are. Let the voters know the West Side really isn't that conservative. Like, it is more about just, being honest. I think, like, people loved Dorothy Shepherd because she just got things done and she was a very lovely person. I don't think everyone is just prescribing to, and she was one of the rebels. So, which she was heavily supported for. Like, you'd see her out and people be like, we have pictures of her with us at Pride. So this
yeah,
is not the type of thing. And like, literally, I'm your opponent, Kim, here in this race, like, and genuinely want to see the PCs not just be this creepy, hyper religious, ultra traditional party, because that's not
yeah.
what it was, and I don't think it's what it should be.
Well,
I
that's
don't
not
think
what people are. People
it's
are
not what
not
people
like,
represents New Brunswickers.
this is not like, we're not seeing people return to the church in droves. It's not a good
Mhm.
representation of where things are. And when you act like it is, when you act like people are just looking for you to have the nice family, the polished politician, like,
Yeah.
you just give them more reasons to sharpen their machetes and to be
Hmm.
like, yeah, man, you can't trust any of them. They're nuts. They're owned by the Bilderberger Group or the World Economic Forum. Like, all that stuff starts to penetrate. And so, I mean, candidates, we got to do a better job, guys. Like, that's all I'll say here. We can wrap this up here. Like, we have
Yeah,
to do a
because,
better
like, I
job.
will say, I am 6 months pregnant. Everybody,
Hmm.
hi, and will still be running for office and showing up at your door literally 9 months pregnant. So it's one of these things that, like, has since, and it's an NB polypod baby. Like, this child
It's true.
going through this, like, medical system with a baby in 2024 when my first child was born in 2011, and I'm having a starkly, similar yet different, more institutionalized experience.
Yeah.
It informs so much about my politics, even more so than it did before. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about some of that, but it is just about being the person and being honest with who you are, what your situation in life is, where you're at, how the world affects you, how that would inform what you're going to go to Fredericton to do and talk about. So with both, we still don't know who the Liberal candidate is for this riding, but I'm so interested to hear from everybody around the ballot there about how they feel that they can make a difference in Fredericton based on who they are, what they believe.
And if you're going to make a difference, you got to know the truth about the issues and how the system works. And you have to
Mhm.
understand governance and all of that. And you don't. Almost no candidate does. I didn't know a whole lot about it before I got into politics, but I'll tell you, it's a steep learning curve. And if you don't want to be 3 years into your mandate before you figure out how things actually function and work and connect, and then this is a great pod for you to listen to. So let's move on. We'll move off from the TikTok star section as our banner, so it articulated, and we're going to move on to the polling section. So you all were polled. Now I say you all, and we're talking about Twitter. And in that poll, let's just go to it and see the most updated version here.
Yes. What was your question again?
Well, the question was about, purity with idealism, right? And how, what I was really trying to flush out with all this was this question around, let me just read it here 1 second. So, have you abandoned your more idealistic intentions when considering who to vote for in favor of more pragmatic positions? And I said, we are seeing quite a few people who used to talk a big game on transformative politics and policies embracing mediocrity. Is that you? And I meant for that to be a little bit scathing, right? I meant to be a little bit pokey, because the thing I've noticed about Twitter, and it's frustrated me. I mean, I've kind of backed off Twitter. I'm not as engaged there anymore. It's just the audience isn't there. There's not, like, the people there are mouthpieces. They just want to go off about every other day and not get their hands dirty with anything. I'm not saying everybody, but my overwhelming perspective is that it's people who are thoughtful, and it's people who are engaged, but they're not necessarily like involved, and they don't skin in the game, and they're not willing to put their name on it, and they're not willing to like put themselves in front of people in their community and their neighbors and do some work. Again, this is not everybody on Twitter. Please don't hear me saying that. No. I've just been frustrated with the overwhelming amount of people who are just armchair politicians and armchair and analysts and I mean, if you are an analyst, go do a podcast like we did. Like, that's what we ran into. We were on there doing the same thing, and you're like, what? Let's practice the discipline of actual face-to-face conversation. So the results, before I go off on another tangent, I'm full of tangents. I have them. Number one option was, I'm not a Puritan anymore. Number two option was, no, I'm still a radical. Number three option was, I've always been a moderate. And number four option was, hey, none of these apply. I vote for different reasons. So what do you think the results were?
Oh, well, I think that's cheating because you kind of already told me.
Okay, what is it? 25 votes in, which is pretty good for a Twitter poll. And we've got 8% of people saying, I'm not a Puritan anymore. So there are 8% of people who are like, you know what? I tried this purity game thing, and it doesn't produce results or whatever, right? 40%. Nope, I'm in it. I'm still a radical. 40% as well. Always been a moderate. And then 12%, I vote for different reasons. Steve Adore, a longtime listener of the pod, and we've commented on Steve before, run into him in Rockwood Park. Love Steve for wandering on here. He said it's the opposite for me. I voted strategically once, and this is where I think I want the conversation to go. So thank you for priming us here, Steve, because you really got the message I was trying to get out, which was people being a bunch of cowards talking about strategic voting. That's my opinion. I'm going to use inflammatory, combustible language here.
Bombastic,
because I think it's important to have these two extremes positioned here to talk about what we mean. And he says, I voted strategically once in 2015, partly to oust the federal conservatives, partly for the promise of electoral reform. So in other words, Steve voted for the Liberals. Said, I won't be making that mistake again. I'm back following my heart for votes cast at every level. Conservatives and Liberals are disqualified by default. Steve, no wonder you listen to our podcast. Because I feel like we're the same way. Like, and I have so many reasons. Like, I just went off on a tangent before about why I feel like Liberals are just failing us as a political party that can influence the and improve our community and make things better and bring us together. And like, politics has that power. And to watch it go by for cheap versions of negative and like overly simplistic and reductionist politics and communications is cowardice. And then for people to come out and say, especially people who I saw on Twitter in 2020 when you and I were running back then. People like Twitter in New Brunswick was lit up with activists and radicals and people who demanded purity to ideals, and I hated some of that and I loved it at the same time. I felt like it was
Yeah.
at least there was some honesty. I mean, there's honesty.
I was a big participant in that and got called out by, one Twitter user recently for comments I made in 2020.
Mhm.
And it's like hours and hours of podcasting still doesn't undo some tweets you may have made years ago, right? Like it is this place where it's super black and white. There is no room for nuance. There's no room for like unpacking things like this.
Mhm.
And so it turned toxic really quickly, in my opinion.
It did. And I think there was some immaturity to that, right? Where it's like guys like super hallmarky statement, but it always informs me on this stuff. Like people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And you're not going to see how much you care until you see it in their eyes, you feel it in their touch, and you talk to them in face to face. You can't see it on Twitter. So, like let's stop thinking that our idealism and our stuff, like that immaturity of, well, you didn't say the right thing, or you didn't post the right thing about the country that's at war overseas, or you didn't, this cancellation piece where it's like, well, because you're offside with a piece of the puzzle, you're offside with the whole thing. We're gonna
throw it out.
Yeah,
throw it in the trash.
That's immature. I'm not talking about that level of idealism. I'm talking about kind of a future oriented, like a type of politician and candidate and party that's willing to say things aren't good. We see them. Here they are. And here's how we're going to respond. And we're going to try to push at the local and community level to make politics something everybody owns again and is engaged with, or more people are engaged with.
And I think that's a good point with the Liberal piece about just kowtowing to the lowest common denominator with the language that they're using in the public space, which is like, no to Higgs, can't do Higgs, no more Higgs, da 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 da. Like, okay, cool, but like, what is it that you're gonna do once you're there? Like, I get that you New Brunswickers only ever vote out politicians; they don't vote them in. But what is your plan? Like, what is the next 4 years going to look like? How are you going to course correct the fact that we have travel nurse contracts well into the next, 3 to 4 years, already totaling $170 million? I have seen all the tweets and all the posts about how that happened, but what are you going to do about it?
Well,
what's your plan?
Like, who's providing thought leadership to this party, right? And and we'll look at the Liberals, because everybody wants to say, well, if you don't want Higgs, you better vote for the Liberals because the Greens will kill your chances of having government. It's like, you know what? Prove to me that the Liberals will be any better. And you know what? They haven't. Why? Because at the end of the day, it comes down to like the roadmap, not just for change, but the roadmap for the future. Yeah. And I have to say, the best people in the ledge at being able to like pick apart the problems legislatively and in policy, they're in different parties. Like there's good ones in each party. But in the Greens case, Megan and Kevin and David all do it really well. And they've gotten inordinate amount of media time, like compared to who? Like which Liberal candidate has been able to, or elected official has been able to get as much notice from the media as David Kuhn or Kevin or Megan? Which one? I don't see one. And there's some heavy hitters on there.
Leader.
And of course Susan Holt does, of course, as leader of opposition. But the candidates, that are running right now are talking about really frustrating stuff from what I see. Like we're talking about like nebulous that all has to do with just hating on Higgs. And all you're doing is you're playing into that, like you said, lowest common denominator politics, and people are over it. They don't trust you. They think politicians are all a bunch of liars. And when you do that, you're not giving them any reason to believe in something better.
Yeah. So, like I really have this beautiful dream of, and I've said this on here before, where there's 6 to 10 Greens
Yeah.
who either the Liberals or the Conservatives have to convince of their policy. Like, that is when you will actually have a way to change things. So if you're an advocate, let's say, and there's something that's coming up and that you really want to see shift or whatever, you're not going to those two main parties for it anymore. You're going to the Greens to work with them to get that, you know, that deciding vote, whichever way it's going to go, figured out. And how great is that?
Yeah.
Because
And
with
and I
with
don't want to just, sorry, I cut you off.
Oh, no, that's okay. I just think that with where it's gone in the past 200 years or so, putting all of our eggs in one basket has gotten us here. Either basket, red or blue, two wings of the same bird.
Yeah,
Like,
they are
just
two wings. I
because,
love that statement. Like, left or right, they're two
yeah,
wings of the same bird. Can we please talk about the other birds in the sky that matter
yeah.
and the other ideas that matter that could change things? And like,
Maybe that will
sure,
bring some twigs to your nest to make it a little more shored
nice,
up.
nice. Yeah, and it's a fragile system right now, and I have to say, I'm here at the grassroots level with a lot of people who make around the same amount of money I do, which is not much money. Well, last year I made $54,000. There you go. Fight me, Twitter, on my privilege here. It's less than the average household income.
Yeah.
And I went through separation and fighting for my kids and doing all this at the same time and still on council. I'm not a friggin' hero. I just really care about this stuff. And listen to me when I say the people out there on the corner are not blind or deaf. They can see things crumbling and they're going to look for someone to blame, and they are. And for you, like, to miss this opportunity in this election is crucial. Stop talking about hating Higgs, and for Higgs, stop talking about Susan Holt being just this like nefarious Brian Gallant liberal. Can we have a discussion about ideas? I get it. That type of like heady policy conversation isn't going to catch. It's not going to win you the election. But can you at least have it to point to it so that people who are responsible at local levels and are trying to practice a level of responsibility in their community can look to it and say, okay, I can see where this is going. I can start to talk to some of my neighbors who might go try to burn the legislature down about like, hey, you know what? I get it. They do suck. But look, there is some stuff going on here. And trust me, like, I pay attention to this. Like, there's hundreds of me out there. There's only 49 MLAs, but there's hundreds of you and I's out there who are just average people involved in leadership in our communities who do pay attention to politics and do pay attention to ideas and this stuff. So anyway, let's look at the other poll. That was the idealism poll. The other poll is also, I think it really backs up this conversation we just had, which is by Narrative Research. And so what we saw was a little bit of movement, but it's all within the margin of error. And so this poll was from 400 New Brunswickers, 18 years plus. Oh shoot, I just lost it. There we go. The interview date was May 8th to May 30th. So 5% margin of error. And, this is why I really don't like narrative stuff. This is why I think narrative continues to get bad marks on Canada 338. You're not hitting a big enough sample size. And so a 5% margin of error in an election like this is a world of difference, my opinion. And what was the numbers, though? Completely satisfied with the provincial government led by Blaine Higgs, 3% of the population. 26% mostly satisfied, 27 mostly dissatisfied, 36 mostly completely dissatisfied, 7%. You know what? I think I can share it. No, I won't bother sharing it. I'll just read it off. Sorry, Rogers TV guys, you're not going to get the special treatment this week. Okay, keep going through. There's February numbers too, so some of this has shifted, right? Like 1% of people less are completely satisfied with the government, and 1% more are mostly satisfied. But anyway, there's some margin of error stuff here, whatever. Everything's really the same. I mean, from February to May. That's a long time in an election year like this. Like the Liberal
Mhm.
Party is down to 37% of support, with 39% in the Moncton area, 33% in our area in Southern NB, 39% in Northern. The PCs are sitting at 34%. They've not really changed. The Greens are at a little less at 13% from 15%. With Northern NB being a strong point for them and Southern NB getting 12%. People's Alliance have collapsed. The NDP, and we've talked about this before, the NDP getting 13%. You'll never see it. This is why I think narrative is calling some people on redial here who continue to weigh in on this stuff. So, anyway, Susan Holt, Blaine Higgs, David Kuhn, like all within margin of error of each other. Like Susan Holt's 25% preferred, Blaine Higgs 20%, David Kuhn 15%.
Jeez.
The margin of error is 5 points. So
Yeah.
as far as leaders go, people are as comfortable with David Kuhn as the next premier of this province as they are Susan Holt, based on the margin of error.
Or Higgs.
Or Higgs, exactly. And so what are you going to see from this? Well, the seat projections are 23 seats for the Liberals, 23 seats for the PCs, and 2 for the Greens. Right? And I don't, 23, must be 3 for the Greens, sorry. But I don't believe these numbers, I have to say. And I like polling, but I like good polling. And this polling doesn't help us. Like in a situation where you have such a tight race, we need to drill into this a lot more. And there's just no money for it, not in the kind of the public space. And like Narrative does public research like this. They get funding from sources to do this. Parties can pay for their own polling, but they don't release it.
Yeah, this is why I've never been a fan of polling, to be honest, because especially in New Brunswick, because you don't have the boots on the ground or the even environmental, knowledge of living here to know what the hell is going on. So it really doesn't speak to what the locals are saying, especially ones that are involved in a lot of this stuff, who are getting people to sign up for different things. To see the overwhelming sort of support at the big Liberal leaders dinner this past couple weeks, like there's so much that they don't look at and they don't consider.
Yeah, and they can't. They're not designed to. They're designed to get that raw data, but that's where analysts like us can come in. But that's where analysts like us come in, and we can talk about these differences. And here's one difference. The Conservatives raised $274,000 in 2023, first quarter, third quarter. I can't remember exactly. I was trying to find that. Jacques Poitras put it out. So, Jacques, if you're listening, I would love for you to comment in some section of our Twitter and tell us the facts. But I remember seeing it, and I couldn't find the number breakdown again.
So you can search Twitter only by topic now?
No, it's bizarre.
Something like that.
You used to be able to search people's pages by exact keywords. You can't. I couldn't figure out how to do it. Maybe you can. Anyway, but the Conservatives raised about $150,000 more than the Liberals, and the Liberals only raised like 70,000 more than the Greens. Like, people aren't giving enough credit to the willingness of voters right now to consider an alternative than Liberal or a PC. And you can see that because the Liberal number should be blowing up with people who are scared of Higgs again, people who like the amount of dissatisfaction with the government, the fact that this is a change cycle, the fact that the Liberals have a female premier in the ranks, if you will, leader. There's all kinds of reasons why the Liberals should be doing a lot better, and they're not. And I think it goes back to the conversation we just had. Yeah,
and really, like the reality is, I feel like it's Groundhog Day again on here. People conflate provincial and federal politics all the time. So the big hate on for the Liberals is just it's going to affect the provincial Liberals. Like, it's going to. There's just
the Liberal brand is almost dead. I saw some some numbers from Nova Scotia showing Tim Houston almost sweep the province, and the Liberals getting blown out of the Halifax region and put down to 1 seat. Like those are
Wow.
some serious poll numbers. Like, and when they're that explicit, that's when polling is really helpful. When polling
Yes.
shows you some explicit differences, you have to believe it. But when it
Yeah, when
shows
they're all
you,
kind of like evenly spread out, it's
when
hard
it's
to be like, oh, okay, like
yeah, when the
anyone's
margin of
game.
right, when the margin of error is 5 points, and your average differences between the three parties in the legislature are like 10 points, in a change cycle,
Eee,
it's not helpful. So
no.
not helpful polling, not good, no positive use for this polling at all. It doesn't help us see anything other than the Liberals are not breaking through.
That's about it. And someone said to me the other day, this is an election that you're going to get out the popcorn for and watch that night and be all over it, because there's just too many good stories. Like there's too many interesting tales of ridings that are
Good
emerging.
candidates, yeah.
Yeah, which is why I'm excited for us to like go through and keep breaking down some of these as we carry on through the summer a little bit. But ideally, we're also going to have some special guests joining us as
Yes,
time
we
goes on
do.
here.
I've been talking to David Campbell, been talking to Donald Savoy, been talking to Andrew Mason. Andrew Mason is booked for next week, guys. We
Mhm.
finally got a conservative to come on here and
Woo!
throw down the gauntlet and tell us how crazy we are and stupid we are for believing the things we believe. I'm not sure Andrew will
Mm,
do that,
no,
but
she's too
I'm
kind.
totally willing to be told that I'm crazy for believing some of the things I believe. Um, and here's the reasons why. I would love that kind of discussion. So, but up next, we are going. Do you want to move to the riding stuff, or do you want to move to the Auditor General stuff?
Let's go to the Auditor General, because that one's been hanging out
Yeah.
for a while now, and I know we have a kind Twitter follower who was asking us directly about that.
That's correct. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's dive into that. What do we know about the Auditor General's report? I mean, Kelly Lamrock's been in the news recently. There was this scandal that was supposedly around Liberals signing up, fake old people or old people without their consent, and said, "Hey, there needs to be a full investigation." But the
Yeah,
people
and
that Kevin Arsenault put forward doesn't warrant it. So we'll have to see. I mean, I have some thoughts on that. It's like when you see your grandmother, when a Green MLA sees their grandmother signed up to vote in the Liberal leadership race, and she's telling him that she didn't sign up. I don't care if that doesn't meet the burden of proof for an investigation. When you see 95% of a retirement home signed up for it, that's ridiculous. And Susan, you can say all you want. We have the, signatures, but that story still has legs, I think. Anyway, Auditor General, over
yeah,
to you. Sorry.
Auditor. Well, I think you just kind of touched on it a little bit, but the piece from Kelly Lamrock about, because he's the child and youth advocate, and he had
Yep.
a piece about how there's over 500 students who are really not attending school because they're on what they call like a reduced time plan. So they have, whether it's behavioral issues or, different things that preclude them from being included. They are only going to school if half time at best.
Mhm.
And what this is considered illegal in his opinion, because it's kind of this human right. It's this thing built into our society that we must educate our youth and try to accommodate any who have issues. And it's a bit of a slippery slope, really, if you start to limit the time that they're spending at school. It can lead to absenteeism overall. There's already big studies that came out that post-COVID, children attending school, it was a huge issue to get some of them back into it again. So that was something that was highlighted, along with a bunch of bus drivers not having appropriate licenses and training and things like that. It's this like mess of the education system. Today, all the kids are off school early because we don't have proper ventilation systems in order to keep them at school, because it's a heat wave, and the ventilation piece is a lot to do as well with the COVID part as well, because they the air exchangers would be a lot better to protect kids if they were not ancient. So all this stuff with, pronouns and trans kids and et cetera, big old distraction over here while the infrastructure of the schools are falling apart. The bus drivers don't have proper licenses or pay, in my opinion. And then there's a bunch of absenteeism because of behavioral issues that the province is not addressing. So there's like way more fires over
Oh
here.
yeah.
Like you say, like the piece you said earlier that's really resonating is like the PCs aren't talking about the issues. And these are the issues. Like there's significant issues within the school system that you're not talking about. Instead, you're talking about trans kids and pronouns.
And this is the thing about incumbent governments, and I'll give credit where credit is due. Scott Reed on the Curse of Politics kind of made mention of this recently. Like this incumbency, like hyper fixation on issues in the media that come out and say, "See, we were right. See, parents really agree with us about this stuff shouldn't be taught in our schools, and sex ed's out of control." And blah, blah, blah. And then every time something comes out that seems to validate or vindicate the conservative government, look, we got a AAA bond rating. Look, we're getting National Post news. Like nobody believes it. Nobody. People have stopped listening to Blaine Higgs. They have stopped listening to the Conservative Party. Everybody thinks the same thing that I talk to. Wow, this party's in trouble. Wow, they can't even get their own incumbents to run again. Wow, they're recruiting Christian nationalist candidates and TikTok stars. What has happened to this party? The fact that the polls don't show it doesn't mean anything. On the ground information, people are seeing this obsession that the Conservatives had to try to pick things out of the media and show how it validates them. And everybody's just like, what are you talking about, bro? Like the schools don't even have right bus drivers. We have travel nurses you're paying 7 times as much money to. Like you say, if this party actually had any chance of hoping to convince the electorate that they are a meaningfully articulated party that is going to be thoughtful and govern for another 4 years or 2 years, whatever it is they get, they need to be out of that lane because they're playing the same game the federal liberals are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Blaine Higgs getting up and saying, well, I'm just outraged with the sex ed curriculum and the stuff. While you don't even have enough bus drivers or nurses, is the same as Chrystia Freeland standing up and being like, we're gonna go after our rich neighbors and get them with this capital gains tax. And look, we're the ones who are gonna lead the class war. Like people don't believe it. And they have a reason to. It's insanity that you would be so tone deaf. So man, that Auditor General's report, right? Like what a time for the other parties to really do what we talked about and like drill into hey guys, look, here are the 5 things that are keeping this Auditor General's report in the negative light that it is in. Yeah. And we're going to fix those 5 things by doing A, B, C, and D. It's a real simple game, right?
It's like a silver platter of things. Like how will you fix, like I said earlier in this podcast, like how will you fix the $170 million of travel nurses? Right now we know that because your sister is about to graduate, right? Yep. They have tons of access to all these students who are going through either NBCC or UNB as free labor. Actually, they're paying to work because
that's correct. They're paying for the curriculum in many cases.
Yeah.
Although there is something to do. Maybe I misunderstood this, but I thought there was some sort of like either debt forgiveness program or something. If you are a nurse and graduate in New Brunswick and stay here, but
amazing. That would be
anyway.
I have to confirm that, but currently, you're paying to go to school and then you're also working 12-hour shifts and you're doing all these proctorships, etc. So there's like huge access to all kinds of talent that's in the current pipeline. They have, from what I understand, a hard time getting into the system. It's a huge process. What barriers are there that you can remove as a province to ensure that there is a seamless transition from school to the working environment? Like, what does that look like? How can you strengthen that? how can you make that better? And I know there's like some rumblings of some improvements and things like that, but like the low hanging fruit is so significant, and hiring super expensive help is such a rich man's approach. Like, so the travel nurses, and they're on, actually, speaking of TikTok, they're on TikTok.
Oh yeah.
Chronicling their life.
Oh
The
yeah.
YouTube runs like, hey, I'm from BC. I thought I'd just check out this cool little province. They have these great little contracts. You make a lot of money, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, there's women and men you can follow on there who are doing this work and, you know, kind of bragging about it because they're making out a serious bank just by flying 2 or 3 provinces over in 2 hours.
Yeah.
So,
oh, and by the way, you know, guess what's become more privatized? And that is, you know, this type of delivery. Like the travel nurses, agents, and stuff like that are also making bank. They are gouging the public system, ruining its credibility, and causing the literal walls to crumble because they are holding nurses in this holding pattern on their lists and selling a list of nurses to a desperate healthcare system in New Brunswick or Nova Scotia or somewhere else, and saying, well, if you want 40 nurses to come to St. John Regional, it's going to cost you $20 million. It's going to cost you $5 million. I don't know what the numbers are because no one's done the investigation, but it should be friggin' illegal.
It should be illegal. And it's so interesting because I just recently saw a study that was done about how we have centralized senior care as well. Yeah. So that's that will be the next big thing I bet you see scandal wise, is that we have privatized so much of senior care away from the public space. Like it used to be, there was like a big network of mom and pop, like senior centers and care centers and things like that. And now you're seeing like big Shanxes and like big organizations that, and not to knock like some of these ones that are at least started local and now have grown. But that creating, as we know, because we live in a market economy, when you create scarcity, you can then increase prices, right?
That's
so
right.
when you don't have any public beds and you need to look to the public sector, you're going to pay what you have to pay because you have no other option. So the same thing, like by starving the public sector of nurses, you're able to look to the market then, and you're going to have to pay what the market has to pay. And there's lots of evidence of lobbyists and things that have gone on over the years to, you know, move away from public care in favor of private care. And it's just this like whittling away slowly but surely out of the public eye in these back rooms and meetings with politicians and saying, you know, well, if you just shave like, you know, $10 million off this budget and put it into this budget, you basically move around the chess pieces to make it so it favors the market instead of the public sector. And so with nursing, with senior care, with probably, who knows, teaching in the future, because you have people like Fatine out there saying that parents should get their cashola for themselves to go put their kids into whatever private school they want instead of homeschool. You see it. You can see the little, like, just little termites. This guy doing the analysis said, like, it's like termites. It's like all of a sudden the house is crumbling. You're like, what the hell happened? Yeah. And it's because they have already been infesting your house, your legislature for a long time.
You know, the market economy has taught us planned obsolescence is now an appropriate business tactic, and it's becoming an appropriate political tactic too, right? Where we plan to destroy something the public needs so that we can it's like it's cashing in on negativity. Like it's cheap politics to say, oh, the government couldn't run a 2-car funeral, so we're going to be the government that outsources all of our care to a private system that has to make more money than what it did before. Oh, well, the private sector is more efficient. How? Show me the numbers. Because, by the way, a very small example, but a very important one, City of St. John here, folks. We used to privatize our garbage collection. Oh, well, they work harder than union workers. You know, the private sector, they don't get paid to sit at home, and they don't have these crazy benefits and blah, blah, blah. It's hardworking men and women.
Classic
in the private
union
sector.
busting.
So that was the pitch. So it was like, let's outsource it. Let's just pay somebody else and just, you know, cripple our public service in this area. And like, you know what they did? eventually that private company became big enough on that contract that nobody could compete with them. And so we unnaturally inflated, I think it was Faro, excuse me if it wasn't, but a group like Faro, let's say, for the purpose of this podcast. And then Faro started to come back to the city and upping the price all the time. City finally had enough of it and said, no, we're bringing it back in-house. They had to make a bunch of investments again in trucks and service personnel. And after a couple of years of that, you know what they save on average? $1 million a year in collection on average. Like, the upfront investment will yield the results. But all we've had are politicians from the Liberals and the Conservatives, from Frank McKenna right down to Blaine Higgs, saying we're going to cash in on people's dissatisfaction and, you know, really their lack of awareness about politics and government and how things are operating. And we're going to convince them that the system is the problem and the government's the problem and that the private sector is the savior. And now we're paying through the nose for our healthcare. We're paying through the nose for our housing. We're paying through the nose for our groceries. Like, show me the math,
best
guys.
episode ever of The Simpsons for this stuff is when Homer becomes the garbage commissioner. And because he wins because he tells everyone, I'm going to take care of everything. It's all going to be perfect. It's going to, and then he runs out of money within like 2 weeks of having this, because the other, you know, former garbage commissioner, of course, knew you have to be super pragmatic in how you manage these things to make sure everyone can get the best service possible. So when you're flying in travel nurses and you're doing this and that, like, you're acting like Homer did and thinking like you're going to fix everyone's problem with money. And it isn't about that. It's about how you manage it and how you ensure that everyone is getting the best service that they can. And that takes time, energy, people, collaboration, all stuff that the premier has no time for.
Resources too, right? Like, of course it takes money. Like, I dare say,
not just money, I should say.
No, I agree. Yeah. You're absolutely right. You have to have a disposition of collaboration and create a good culture. Like Blaine Higgs being in the news telling a nurse if so this is a funny thing.
Full circle.
2018, when Blaine Higgs was running in an election, he was saying to I think it was 2019. Sorry, I'm trying to remember the exact year, but anyway,
QP would know.
Yeah, QP would know. He told a nurse if she wanted to make a better wage than the one she's getting paid in New Brunswick, that she should move to Alberta. Okay, well, she did. And now the Alberta nurse is here and costing you 20 times as much. Cool. Well played, Blaine. Right? It's just like, if somebody actually wanted to come along and fix the healthcare system, they'd have to put this province into a lot more debt for a good 5 to 6 years to do it. And they'd have to make massive investments. But after that 5 or 6 years, it would probably end up saving us all kinds of money in so many areas. We'd stabilize it and it'd be done for a generation. But that's not what happens, because politicians only think in 4-year terms. And they're unwilling to take risks in many cases to be a politician that's going to think about something longer term. Anyway, moving on.
Butternut Valley.
Okay, so we have another riding to tell everybody about. This is the riding of Arcadia-Butternut Valley-Maple Hills. So it's 3, used to be known as Gagetown, Petitcodiac. It's been Ross Wetmore's name since 2014. He must have got in with Allward in 2014, and with Allward. Was Allward?
Yeah, Allward was 2010, but he also Gallant was.
Gallant beat him in 14.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
He would have come in just after David Allward.
Yes. So there we are. Must have been a different name before that. I don't see anything. So Hampton Kings, I think it's
like Westmoreland,
yeah,
Havelock, Cambridge
Narrows,
like up through the middle, sort of Grand Lake, south of Grand Lake.
So this is another one of those interesting ridings. It's Connie Larson for the Liberals, new candidate, never run before. PC Don Monahan, who's never run provincially before that we know of, but was on council somewhere in one of these communities. He is on council.
He's on council. I have his profile. Right. Where'd you go, friend?
Oh, it must be Butternut Valley.
No, because that's not this riding's a little confusing to us as townies.
Don't we know the mayor of Butternut Valley?
Uh, yeah, she's the mayor of Timmins.
Yeah, that's a whole
Uh,
funny story.
so he just invested in the KOA in Sussex. Where'd you go? Where'd you go, Dawn? So there we go. He is currently.
He was in the military.
He was in the military. I gotta go to his page here. Found it. The PC party finally got some of their candidates on their webpage, which is exciting. So he proudly, for 8 years, I proudly served on city council. Okay. I think it might be Petticodiac, but
Which
I
is
will
in a city, but that's cool.
Yeah.
Downtown,
So, well, there's only apparently 8
unless he lived in Moncton or something. Anyway, Dawn Monahan, there's not a lot about you. We don't know a lot about you. Would love to learn more. You got to tell us more, though. And it doesn't look like you're campaigning very hard yet.
Should definitely say what city or town or whatever you were on council for.
Connie Larson, Liberal.
Connie Larson, yeah.
Brian Boucher, former Liberal, turned Green, now running for the Greens.
Yes.
We see Brian down here in St. John a lot. He's often at the market. He's
got a nice.
He makes
business.
his rounds, man. Like that guy.
Yeah.
I see him on the road all the time around the province.
Yes, and just looking at Don Monahan's, he's been out with Fatine. He's been out with Rob Moore.
Oh, good.
He's been, of course, advertising for Higgs. Yeah, so he's just been vote Don, rural resident, rural solutions. That's his slogan. But yeah, cool. Not a lot of Facebook love. He's got 300 followers on here, and
well, that's twice what Connie Larson has. Connie Larson, again, same deal, sort of a first-time runner for a main party. You got to think that Liberals would have rather had Brian Boucher running for them as he was there, but she's kind of in that same area. She's very much a nature lover and the farming piece. I see she's working a lot on this Arcadian chair project, which is actually an interesting project. I wonder if it's sort of like modeled after the Fogo chair, Fogo Island chair or whatever, which is a huge social enterprise and sustainability initiative. If you haven't heard of it, but she's got 160 followers. She went to Madawaska Regional High School. She graduated from Athabasca, but not a lot really on the Facebook area either. No candidate page.
Brian's just behind Don's numbers. Like he's got 241 followers on here.
Yep.
And
but Brian doesn't. Brian also have his own candidate page, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. Yeah. That is super active. So Brian Boucher, Green Party, Arcadia-Butternut Valley-Maple Hills.
Yes. So yeah, he's active. He's on there. He's got 147 likes, 241 followers. Rural community. That's pretty good. Now tell me, did you say Don had his own candidate page?
He has a candidate page under his own name. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. So there you go. There you have it, everybody. That's another riding, and we're gonna call that. We're not gonna highlight every riding. We know Liberals are gonna friggin' take a bunch of the northern ridings. They're uninteresting to us, really. Like, I'm interested in the politics in those ridings. I'd love to understand more. If you want to come on the show and you're listening, get at us. We'd love to hear from you from an analysis perspective. But for the most part, we want to continue to highlight these toss-up ridings where there's no incumbent. The PCs have just lost. In this case, the PCs lost Ross Wetmore, right? That's a big loss for them, and it's you can't tell me with Tories like Bruce Northrop talking about running for Susan Holt for the Liberals in Sussex, which would be the Liberals' biggest get. It wouldn't do anything to show them as a transformative party, in my opinion. But he's well liked and he's won, before. So it's an interesting get.
This is kind of interesting here too. I see Mike Bigger, who's a counselor in Quispam.
Yes.
He is on here with his nomination support. He did a video for Dawn in April to showcase his support for him, which is actually kind of rare. There's not a lot of city councilors that will put their name on the line for somebody.
Yeah,
So
shout out to Mike for having a position on it.
yeah,
Need more of
exactly.
it.
Because usually
We got
you kind of want to stay neutral because you just have to, like, you never know who you're going to work with. So
we got to wrap it up. Rogers TV. We'll be back next week.